is centered, so 0 for the midline. We don't want to change the profile, 0. So it means that the lower incisor is there. And we don't have any problem with the curve of Spey, so we have a very good arch. So if we don't have any problem with the curve of Spey, and anything, we don't need to gain any space. So we don't need extraction, and we don't have any movement of the lower inside molars. This is something that should be at the end of treatment. So we don't move the lower molar. Now we have a class 2. We have 5 millimeters of class 2. So we insert the upper arch at this point. The upper arch for us is indicated by the position of the upper molar. So that means that there is a molar relationship of minus 5 because it's a complete class 2. So at this point, we know that we have to move the upper molar 5 millimeters back. All right? So if everything is okay in the lower arch, you have to consider the upper arch there. Why do we consider only the upper molar? Why, for us, the upper molar is the indication of the upper arch?
Because we could
We can visualize.
It's the same
Hold
for
on a second.
every tooth, you know?
We have done, you see that there are almost all the voice of our treatment plan are considering the lower arch. Why? We consider the upper arch, we insert the upper arch considering only the upper molar.
because we could move it.
Because we can visualize more in the upper arch.
Because upper first molar is in a wrong place, and we want to move it.
Yeah.
But it's the same with
Think about it, think about it.
each tooth.
If I have the first molar here, attached to the first molar, there's a contact point, second premolar. Attached to the second premolar, there is the first premolar. Attached is the canine. So, if you have this here, you cannot have all the arch in the right position. But if you have this
In the
in a
right
good
position.
position,
You can easily move it.
and you do everything, and you have a good Bolton discrepancy. You don't have any Bolton discrepancy. Everything else should fall in the right position. Everything else, because if you put this here, in order to have a counterpoint with this has to be there. In order to have a counterpoint with this has to be there. In order to have a counterpoint, that has to be there. And then at this point you have the incisors, and that is, if they have the correct torque and correct bite, you can easily finish it. Consider that the indication of the upper arch is only the upper molar.
You could distalize every time the 6 molar, the first molar, the superior, when is in the second class.
It's not really important what you do, because once you know what you're doing, you can even decide to extract the first premolar. But the question is, we always distalize molars? What is the meaning in adults? Or maybe if there is the second and the third molar?
Yes, or it's every time it's stable with this distalization.
Huh?
Is a stable this distalization?
Distalization stable.
Yes.
Can we talk about that later on?
Okay.
It is a good way in a growth patient.
What?
In a growth patient, it is a good way.
Why don't you? Let's talk about this when we will talk about class 2. So, just to make a long story short, yes, the molar distalization is stable. And you said, can you distalize it in adults or something like? What do you have?
No, in a growth patient.
In growing patients?
Yes.
Yes, you can distalize it in a growing patient. Actually, it's the best way of distalizing. And then I'm gonna show you all the research we have done. So, if we put this back, we know that everything should be in the right position. If the molar goes in the right position, after that, you can bring the premolar in the right positions. Then you bring the canine in the right position, and the incisor has to be in the right position if you do that. So the upper arch is determined. We can, no, it's not determined. We can face or picturize what is the upper arch only considering the upper molar. For us, that is very important. Because now, let's see when we have crowding in the lower arch. Let's say that we have crowding. We have like 3 millimeters crowding in this area and 3 millimeter crowding in this area. Okay? Now, we keep going. We have not only crowding there, but the midline is centered. Oh, let's see how is the profile. Profile is indicated by the lower incisors. Why we consider the lower incisor to indicate in the profile? Let's go back a little bit and I'm going to show you. Because the position of the lower incisor determines the position of the upper incisor. And the position of the upper incisor determines the position of the lower lip. Because the upper incisor is controlled by the lower lip. And the position of the lower lip determines the position of the upper lip. So if you control the lower incisors and you finish in class 1, you know exactly where the lips are going to go. So when we say profile, that means the position of the lower incisor, because we know that the profile is made by that position. Okay? So let's go to crowding. Midline is central. Profile, we don't want to move it. We like where the lips are. So we write 0. Curve of Spey, let's say 1 millimeter. Now, on the right side, we have 4 millimeter of request of space. In the left side, we have 4 millimeter of request of space. Okay? So, in other words, we have 8 millimeters both sides. But we prefer to say 4 one side, 4 the other side. At this point, it's very difficult to treat without extracting. So what we do, we say we extract 2 first premolar in the lower arch. So we have space that we need 4 millimeter, but we cannot extract a tooth for 4 millimeters. We have to extract a tooth that is 7. So at this point, we know that 4 are needed for the space requirement. But 3 is more forward movement. So let's write it down. The lower molar has to come forward 3 millimeters. Why? Because we don't want to move the incisor. Because if we want to move the incisors, it's another ballgame. But we don't want to move the incisors. So these 7 millimeter are used to level the curve of space and to solve the crowding. So we have 4 millimeter. If we use 4 millimeter out of 7, we have 3 millimeter of molar protraction. If we have a good relationship, we have to maintain a class 1. If we have a class 2, we have to convert class 2 to a class 1. Let's say now what is going to happen. We want to bring a class 2 to a class 1. So if you have a class 2, we could move the upper molar 3 millimeters back. Or we can move the lower molar 3 millimeters forward. Or we can do any combination. Okay? So it's pretty easy. We know what is the molar relationship. We decide what we want to do. So we had 3 millimeters per side of crowding in the lower arch. We had a class 2 end-to-end in the molars. So we have 3 millimeters of class 2. Let's go back to our treatment plan. 3 millimeters of crowding. The midline is centered. Profile we want there. Curve of space 1. We need 4 millimeters each side. We extract a premolar that is almost 7 millimeters. We have a movement of the lower molars that is the difference between what we need and what we have. So we go for 3 millimeters. We have a relationship, a molar relationship that is end-to-end, 3 millimeters. At this point, it's very easy. The upper molar should be there. No movement. Now, why is so important to divide everything by arches, half arches, right and left? Because you already have all the anchorage. You already know what type of anchorage you need. Because here is a maximum, because I don't want to move this one. And this is completely moving, maximum anchorage, both sides in the upper arch. In the lower arch is a moderate anchorage both sides. So I know exactly what anchorage I have. So I know what, now I decide how to do it. Because this has to go back 3 millimeters. This has to come forward 3 millimeters. And 1 millimeter is for the curve of space. This has to come forward 0 millimeters. And this has to go back completely. Moderate anchorage, maximum anchorage. So this is 3 millimeter distance, distalization for crowding, solve the crowding. And 3 millimeter more movement forward just to close the space. Now, the most difficult thing that we have when we extract teeth is to foresee what are the movements that we have to do it. And with this small, really easy way of doing the treatment plan, we know what we have to do it. Now, during the extraction treatment, we always have to reevaluate our treatment plan. Because our reference point is the relationship between the space that we have and the space that we need. So once you know what type of anchorage you need, you choose what are the means that you utilize. So we all, in bidimensional technique, we always use the most efficient way of moving teeth. And the most efficient way of moving teeth is a class 1 force, so intra-arch. We never use class 2s to move teeth. Class 2 are made only to increase the anchorage. So we move teeth with the class 1 forces. So if I want to move this back and I have to maintain this here, I have to anchor these teeth here. And I use a class 1 force to move the canine back. So what we do, we make a stop in front of the molar, and it has to be very precise, and we're going to bend the stop in front of the molar. And we're going to put the uprighting spring on premolars. And we're going to use the extraoral traction. Oh, this is what we do when we want to intrude the incisors. Because you cannot finish if you have not opened the incisors. So, first movement is the canine. Why don't you bring canine and incisor together? Because it's faster to bring incisor and canine together. But as I told you this morning, I don't want to be faster. I want to be precise. I don't want to make mistake. So if I move incisor and canine together, I lose, at least in my mind, I lose all the reference point. I prefer to move the canine and put the canine in class 1. And when I have the canine in class 1, I have the reference to see what is happening when I move the incisors. So this technique is not a technique that is faster. It's a technique that is simple and precise. For premolar extraction, canine retraction on one side, we want to center the midline. We can use and work in half arch. Is asymmetric situation are not a problem. Okay? So make sure that you, for us, it's very important to, our thinking is made right, left, 2/2 arch. Right, left always. So how can we anchor the lower arch? You see, I always talk about anchorage. I never talk about movement. I talk about anchorage is the most important thing. All the treatment plan is made to understand what type of anchorage you have to use. In the lower arch, lip bumper, upright springs on the molar, and tip back on the molars. We use all possible anchorage on the back, if we have to have maximum anchorage. when we are in the middle of treatment, we always consider what is our problem and how much space do we have. Every single visit. So we know that we have to maintain maximum anchorage. Because if we need 3 millimeters and we have 3 millimeters, we cannot lose anything. When we don't need anchorage, we have class 1 forces without any stabilization, any anchorage. Like in this case, we have 3 millimeters of crowding, 6 millimeters of space, anchorage is moderate, we don't need any anchorage. But still we monitor the situation, we can change the anchorage. It might be that this goes faster, and at that point it became maximum anchorage in back. Or maybe it can be that this goes faster and it becomes maximum anchorage in front. But you have to always to control how much crowding you have and how much space you have. This is the only reference point that you have. Again, when we have to set an anchorage in the front, we have torque and upright spring on the canine. Torque on the incisor, upright spring on the canine. So, in other words, if this went back too fast, I check how much space I have. I don't have any more crowding in front, and I have still some space to close. That means maximum anchorage here. So I change the condition of the anchorage. And we can do it during treatment without changing the wire. Like this, we have the 0 crowding, 2 millimeters of space. So that means that this has minimum anchorage here. But that minimum anchorage here means maximum anchorage here. So what do we need to do? We need to set anchorage in front because the situation is changed.
So, sorry.
Yeah.
Now you have to have maximum anchorage
In front.
in front to bring it behind you.
To bring this forward.
To bring it. Okay. Visualize the nose there.
So
Okay.
we don't have any grounding anymore,
Yes.
but we have 2 millimeters of space. So if we bring this back, we are lingualizing the incisor. We don't want it because we set the profile, we like the profile.
Okay.
So we want to maintain this.
Okay.
So we have to mesialize this.
Okay.
So in order to mesialize this, we have to have maximum anchorage here,
Okay.
minimum anchorage here.
Okay. Thank you.
Let's go back in just a second. Okay. So we have to decide. How do we decide what to do and how to set the anchors? We know where do we want to put the incisors. We know that we have crowding or no crowding. We know how much space we have. That is something that we do every single time an extraction patient comes to our office. So we see there is like 3 millimeters, but we still have some crowding, 3 millimeter crowding. So the anchorage is here. We cannot move this back forward anymore. So maximum anchorage here, and let's bring back this. We have 6 millimeters of space, and we have 3 millimeters here, 3 millimeters there. Minimum anchorage, no problem, just a class 1 force. We have 3 millimeters of space, but we have no anchorage, we have no crowding anymore. So that means that this has to come forward. So this is minimum anchorage, this is maximum anchorage. Okay? And we can change the anchorage using lip bumper, upright spring, tip back, and torque. See? 3 degrees of crowding, 3 degrees of space. This is in the back is maximum anchorage. We have to always think about space that we have and a crowding, space that we need. Okay, this is going to be maximum anchorage. If we don't need anchorage, 3 millimeter of crowding, 6 millimeter of space, let's go with class 1 closes, no problem at all. These are going to close. But then we check them. Because the anchorage can change. We want maximum anchorage in front, torque, upright and springs. And always the same class 1 force. You know, the class 1 force is always the same. Minimum anchorage in the back, which is maximum anchorage in front, torque and upright and springs. What is the torque doing? The torque is trying to bring the teeth forward. What is the upright and spring doing? Is consolidating the canine in the arch. Now, when we do something like that, you have to pay attention on the way you bend the wire. Because when you have a very strong force here, what is going to happen is this area tend to collapse. And this area tend to collapse. So what you do a small over expansion of 2 millimeter on the premolar area. In the premolar area, in the lower arch. Okay? This has to be expanded. When we want to use 300 grams of force, we cannot maintain the correct arch form because otherwise they're going to collapse inside. Torque, upright springs, class 1 force, and you go and close the space. Almost done. No change in the overjet. Little by little is closing. No change on the midline, no change in the overjet.
Sorry, in the line before, why there was an uprighting, a coil uprighting so long?
Because you're talking about this
Yes.
one.
No, the one behind it.
This
Behind-
one?
Not behind that.
This one.
Yes.
This is the upright spring.
Why so long? Behind.
Because you want this to close.
Okay.
And if you put it here, it acts as a stop. You know, there is no space to make it here.
Okay.
Because if you make it here, is a stop, nothing coming forward.
Okay.
So you have to put, this was here, and that has moved forward, and, okay?
Okay.
Now I told you why, you said why this? This because sometimes you're lazy and you don't want to put the hook, so you make a bend.
Okay.
Depends, I sometimes make a bend.
Okay.
The young guys prefer to make the hook, but it's not a big, okay. Now we close the space, the midline is centered transversely, we have a good relation here, we don't have a good relation here. But the class 1 was maintained and everything was closed. Now, treatment plan is very important. After diagnosis, treatment plan is important. After treatment plan is the choose of correct technique. But you have to think. You always have to think. Let's see this case. Class 1 one side, end to end the other side. Crowding. E-space here, deep bite. In your opinion, did we extract or not?
Maybe not.
It's different.
Put a lingual arch.
Hmm?
Put a lingual arch.
So hard to see.
The bumper in the arch.
Two goodbyes. Okay, now,
Extra.
you decide what you want to do. One side is a class 1, one side is class 2, so there is a protraction one side. Again, a little bit for outside. Close the lower arch. And now we are closing the incisors. The midline is centered. But again, always control and check what is the anchorage condition. If you know what are the anchoring condition, you can finish it. You know, this is not perfect if you want, because maybe there's a slight deviation of the midline. But still, every single time, control the anchorage condition. Why is easier to make a treatment without extraction? Because you don't have to think. You already have the lower arch that is, you know, let's say that the class 2, the lower arch is your template. It's no more, the only thing you have to put the upper arch on the lower arch, period. When you extract 4 teeth, is a different ballgame. You have to know what you have to finish with your molars. How much crowding do you have? How much space? Where are the molar going? And when they go, you know where the lower molar going. You have to know where the upper molar goes. But you have to think about it every single time you see the patient. See how much space do you have? What are your reference? How much? And then you change anchorage if you need. And with this technique, you can do it. As you well know, not all teeth move at the same rate. But again, extraction treatment with good control of the lower incisor, even if we protract the lower arch. The lower arch protraction and control of the lower incisor. Then we can have a asymmetric space closure. That is the most difficult thing to do in orthodontics.
Yes.
Asymmetry. Now, we have in our hands a technique that allowed us to work in asymmetry. Again, the wire has to be bent always wider, one side. When you have an asymmetric situation, you need an asymmetric wire. Space is closed here. You have still space here. You made your, there is no crowding. You don't want to have any correction of the profile. So this has to go forward. So what you do an asymmetric protraction. Again, upright springs, class 1 force. That is closed. Now we have to check the midline, if it's there. And it's there. Class 1. Everything is aligned as symmetric. Again, canine guidance. Let's do this. I think you need some some break, right? Have a break. Yes. You see, it's no Claudian, you were not following anymore. If you don't follow, anybody can follow.